Satellite images show a buildup of Russian military activity at the Ukrainian border in recent weeks.
There is concern that Russia is actually getting ready to invade its smaller neighbor. The Kremlin denies this.
Мы, как подчеркнул президент Путин, не хотим никаких конфликтов.
But US intelligence revealed that Moscow has drawn up plans for a military invasion of Ukraine that could involve around 175,000 troops as soon as next year.
In the meeting with Putin, I was very straightforward. If in fact he invades Ukraine, there will be severe consequences.
Ukraine has been trying to join Western organizations like NATO and the EU, but this is at odds with what Russia wants, which is to have influence over the country. The US and Russia have recently expelled diplomats over cybercrime and clashed over energy supplies and a migrant crisis on the border between Belarus and Poland.
After the summit between President Biden and President Putin in June, there was a glimmer of hope that the countries might set a different course. But again, there has been this struggle.
Here's how the clash between the US and Russia over Ukraine is worsening an already tense relationship. Russia invaded Ukraine and seized the Ukrainian peninsula of Crimea after the country staged a pro-Western revolution in 2014. Ever since then, Russian President Vladimir Putin has tried to prevent Ukraine's drift towards the West. Ukraine has for a long time wanted to join NATO, and Putin has voiced anger over the US and its allies' financial and military support of the country.
The Kremlin has made very clear that they feel that any kind of deployment of NATO troops in eastern Ukraine, which would be Russia's western borders, would be a threat. And for Russia, that is a red line.
Отдававшихся этих устных заверениях, что НАТО не будет расширяться на восток. Но все было сделано ровно наоборот.
The key question would be, especially in relation to the Russian buildup of troops on the border, how far will the US and NATO be willing to go in order to protect Ukraine?
While the US and NATO have no obligation to help Ukraine, the Biden administration has threatened serious sanctions against Russia and said it wouldn't tolerate another invasion like the one in 2014. Washington has also said it would help protect Ukraine's sovereignty, but pressed Kiev to reform internal issues like corruption. Tensions between Russia and the US have been building for a while. The US recently imposed sanctions and ordered the expulsion of more than 50 Russian diplomats by June 30th, based on allegations of cyber attacks and US election interference. Moscow retaliated by doing the same, ordering the removal of several US embassy personnel from Russia by next year.
This is a kind of tit for tat, what they call mirror measures taken against the US, who they say has basically violated diplomatic norms. So there is definitely this back and forth, this diplomatic tug of war, if you wish.
In a call with Putin in December, Biden warned that if Russia made any moves in Ukraine, the US would prevent the completion of Russia's Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which Washington sees as a threat to European energy independence. The pipeline would transport natural gas from Russia to Europe and be a huge source of energy revenue for Moscow. Russia is a major exporter of gas to Europe, and an important channel runs through Belarus. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko recently threatened to disrupt that flow of energy after the EU imposed sanctions on the country over a migrant crisis in November on its border with Poland.
Мы обогреваем Европу, они нам угрожают еще, что они закроют границу. А если мы перекроем природный газ туда?
Western leaders have accused Russia of helping exacerbate the crisis, a claim that Moscow denies. Earlier on in Biden's presidency, Washington had wanted to establish a closer relationship with the Kremlin. But as tensions escalate over Ukraine, political analysts say the two aren't making much progress towards that goal.
A lot of it can boil down to the fact that, Russia feels that it has been ignored. Both countries have said, of course, we do not want this confrontation. But it seems as though a lot of the times it's one step forward, two steps back, as they each try to maintain influence and not want to be seen as the weaker between the two sides.